Urban Agriculture, episode number 12, Farmed Here.
This is Urban Agriculture, episode number 12, recorded on December 17th, 2014. Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you are listening to the talk show all about the third green revolution. Joining me today, right here in the studio, Dickson de Palmier.
Hello, Vincent.
Are you ready to have a third green revolution?
You betcha. Sure, bring it on. Actually, I think it's ongoing.
Bring it on.
You bet.
We have a guest today.
Yep.
He is from an indoor farm called FarmedHere.
Exactly. The world's largest, I might add.
Is that right? Well, we'll have to talk about that.
Yes.
Paul Hardej, welcome to Urban Agriculture, Paul.
Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our privilege.
I wish I could be there with you, then we could walk around and look. Right?
And sample some of the goods also. Don't forget that.
Yeah, actually, we can arrange that for sure.
We would love that.
So, Paul, you're sitting in your office, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Where is your office?
Yeah, where are you located?
We are in Bedford Park, which is a small, very small suburb of Chicago, on the southwest side of Chicago. It's a very industrial neighborhood. It's about 10 million square feet of industrial space and 450 residents. But it's literally across the street from Chicago. So driving-wise, we are probably 5 to 10 miles from most of our customers where we deliver our greens to.
Terrific. So,
Paul, let's start by finding out a little bit about you. What's your position there at the company? What's your title?
Well, I'm one of the founders, and I'm also a chief technology officer.
CTO. Yeah. Okay, where are you from?
I'm from Poland originally, from Warsaw.
Oh, my wife's family too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Her mother's name was Halwa. Halwa, I think.
Okay.
So how old were you when you left Poland?
I left Poland when I was 21. So
well, you're only about 25 now, right?
Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm 44, but to set the record straight. But yeah, I was studying architecture in Poland, and this was the time of the transition, from the central controlled economy to capitalism, let's call it, in its modern version, whatever it may be.
Right.
So I decided to leave and continue my education in the U.S. I lived and studied in New York and in Detroit, studied architecture, and then eventually in Chicago, and also did some interior design studies as well, and met my future wife here and settled.
Nice.
So I've never thought I would become a farmer. So coming from largest city in Poland, although some of my friends and family members had to do with farms and or had cousins and colleagues.
Sure.
Did you?
This vacation, I would never know much more about just visiting a farm field, and that's the total experience I really had.
Did you have any other businesses before this one?
Yes, correct. I have founded a real estate development company. First, a construction company, so I have a lot of construction background, which led to creation of a pretty large-scale real estate development company, which I managed for about 15 years. And that business crashed in 2008 with the market. And as I was sitting at home in 2009-ish, or to beginning of 2010, a colleague of mine, who's an ex-real estate developer as well, calls me up and says, "Paul, you should, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting licking my wounds, and I'm trying to figure out what's next." He said, "Well, you should look into vertical farming." And I said, "Can you repeat that?" And he said, "Farming." I said, "What?" I said, "Why are you calling me?" I said, "What do I know about farming?" He said, "Well, you're an architect. I mean, there is this guy, he's speaking in Chicago. You should come and listen. And he's going to talk about vertical farming." And I said, "Well, where is it? Downtown?" He said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Well, come on over. I mean, just walking around." So I did, and you guess who was speaking?
Yeah.
It was Dickson. So Dickson was doing a presentation in Chicago, and I listened. I got totally inspired, and I couldn't sleep that night. I was just Googling through late morning hours trying to what hydroponics means and so forth. Obviously, I had an idea, general idea of the technology of growing plants without soil or controlled environment agriculture, generally speaking. But I did not have any experience.
Did you go up to Dickson after his talk and say hello to him?
Yeah, I did.
Do you remember that, Dickson?
Of course I do. I remember everything. He's joking with me now, Paul.
What year is this, Dickson? Do you remember?
2010, I think.
2010, yeah.
That was the year my book came out.
Correct.
So we met at the mayor's office, too. I remember that as well.
Yes, correct.
So how from that time when Dickson gave the talk to when you opened FarmedHere, how long did that take?
Well, it took about 2.5 years of research, R&D, and actually proving the concept. So what I have decided to do, once I discovered that actually technology is there, I was shocked. I couldn't believe this, that the technology is there, and people grow without soil or in controlled environments for decades. So I said, wow, and obviously the cannabis industry has been driving this for long in many ways, technology-wise. So I set on a quest of setting up a test farm, and I brought a couple of my colleagues, and we did set up a farm on the south side of Chicago, which was in a 5,000 square foot storefront in a neighborhood called Englewood, which is far the worst neighborhood of Chicago.
Right.
The reason we did that is because there was a lot of talk at that time about food deserts, and obviously Chicago has a lot of history in urban farming. So I started to meeting people who have experience in farming in Chicago, and usually either greenhouses or raised beds and so forth. But as I was going to these meetings and shaking hands, and there was a lot of talk about food deserts and how we live and how we eat and access to so forth. So we said, well, why don't we try this in a real food desert and set up a test farm and test different technologies, see which one is going to work. We also set up to really research the market very deeply and understand how the produce industry really works.
Right.
And coming from a real estate background, where a lot of what I was doing for 15 years, sales and marketing, working with marketing people, we had a good sense and idea of how to do that, how to do a feasibility study on that project. And we quickly found out that Dickson was right, that most of the greens travel, 1,000, 1,200, 1,600 miles to the destination, to the consumer, which seemed ridiculous. We quickly found out that it's impossible to grow outdoors year-round in Chicago because of the climate. And we found out that technology is there. You just got to put the pieces together and obviously take it to scale. So we can grow crops, and we identify which crops to grow. We looked at the economic model, obviously. And then, so, very early on, we realized such a great opportunity. Instead of being only a technology company, why don't we create a consumer brand? So we also talked about maybe we should go and talk to guys like Whole Foods Market, for example. Show them what we're doing, which was completely crazy, obviously, and we had no prior and no relationship with these people and no experience in produce, but we did. So we started harvesting some of the greens that we were trying and putting them in Ziploc bags. And taking them to local grocery stores. Eventually, we've met some fantastic people who are involved in the, let's call it, good food movement or local farming movement, who had some connections and made introductions. So we ended up at the meeting with Whole Foods Market, and they came to visit our little test farm in Englewood in the south side of Chicago. These executives from Whole Foods looked really scared.
As well they should be.
Yeah. So I'll later I'll tell everybody's story on the location. But the farm was located at like a totally dilapidated building, and but hey, once they tried the greens, they said, "Wow, this is really fresh. This is really cheap. It's unbelievable." And then, how much can you produce? And I said, well, I was very proud, and I said, well, we can probably grow like 500 pounds a year or something like that. I said, well, it's really not a lot, but I think we're going to give you some space in one of our stores, and you guys can start. So that was end of 2011.
So what were you growing in that little test farm?
Well, we were growing basil, we were growing arugula, and testing all kinds of leafy greens. At that time, I had 4 or 5 different grow systems side by side. I was testing some aeroponics. I was testing, just straight, ebb and flow systems or NFTs, and obviously I was testing aquaponics because from the get-go I realized that there would be a lot of interest in organic local farming. So, when I was reading and calling the suppliers or manufacturers of different type of equipment that one can purchase, the first question I would ask is, is your stuff organic certifiable? I went to an organic conference and started learning about how to certify crops organic, and realized that actually soil-less agriculture can be certified under the National Organic Plan, which was very exciting.
Sure.
So I realized that really the only vehicle for organic farming is aquaponics at this point. Yep. So, yep. I was very fortunate. We've met a gentleman in Chicago. His name is Miles Carson. He's retired right now. Oh. He spent 30-some years. I think, Dickson, I think you've met him once or twice.
Was he with John Edel by any chance?
He was helping John. Yes, he was helping.
Yep.
Correct. So Miles was a self-made inventor, a guy who really spent a career on aquaponics and developed an aquaponic greenhouse in Illinois in 2004. It's a commercial scale operation. So I went to see it, and as I was looking at it, he was getting ready to retire. And so our company actually, we were very lucky because we purchased that greenhouse from him. And that kind of laid a foundation on larger scale operation and experience and real life experience. And obviously some of his inventions and ideas became very helpful in the process of developing our own technologies. So
when did you move to the current location?
In July of 2012. Mm-hmm. So it's a 90,000 square foot facility. It's a post-industrial building that was used for light manufacturing for a couple decades.
Right.
It was sitting vacant for about 6 years. And as Dickson, when you and I were on the Chicago Mayor's task force on vertical farming, and the reason I ended up there is because my real estate background and experience in zoning work and entitlement. So they brought me in and kind of as an expert and tried to help identify the challenges that building codes may pose or zoning codes may pose, and how to address those. So when we worked on that, I realized, the city of Chicago was taking a pretty progressive approach, and they really wanted to see the change. But of course, like any big city, it's going to take time. As our company was being created and formed and really, defined in many ways, we decided not to wait for Chicago to get, their act together in regards to licensing and so forth, and we set to look for suburban communities. And that's how we ended up in Bedford Park.
Got it. So did you have your customers lined up before you moved to the larger facility? Did you have commitments? So and from that you realized that you would be profitable.
Correct. Because let's step back, 2 years. We're still just leaking our wounds, correct? We're getting out of recession. So,
right.
Capital markets are pretty weak and raising money is very difficult. So, we were lucky kind of because on the founder's side, a lot of us had experience in raising money for all kinds of deals, and we had relationships with investors. But, imagine, Dickson, this is middle of recession and I'm calling, an equity fund and I'm saying, hey, I'm doing a vertical farm. Do you guys want to invest? And they say, what? What are you doing?
A vertical what?
So, vertical what? Yes, exactly. And why are you doing this? So obviously we had to really decide on how to prove the concept and answer all the questions that people may have.
You bet.
And the questions are not only one of the first questions would be, can you grow this stuff? What can you grow?
Yes.
How much does it cost to grow it?
Right.
And can you sell it ultimately? And how much money can you get for it? What's the size of the market and can you prove it? So, yes, when we moved to the new location, we had established relationships with probably at that time, I'm saying maybe 30 grocery stores, including most of Whole Foods in Chicagoland. Whole Foods has been extremely supportive in the whole process. Mariano's, which is another chain, and obviously a bunch of independent stores who took our product as well because it was local.
Sure.
And so we also realized in the process that, after we researched the market, that it's not only about the price and quality and being local or being organic, but it's also about providing a solution. So after, now it's almost 5 years of working on this concept, and we have learned from the produce industry that they really want to sell better food, and they want to sell local. They want to sell organic. The problem they're having is economic model, and also consistency and how to source these products. So when you really come with a full solution and say, hey, I'll deliver my product on a regular basis. I'll have competitive price. I'll support it with marketing efforts, in store, outside of store. They love it. It really works.
Terrific.
Can you tell us a little bit about the facility? You said it's 80,000 square feet. Is that right?
It's 90,000 square feet.
Is it one?
Yes.
Is it one level?
It's one level. The building is one level, but it's 24 feet in height.
Right.
Of the space. So we are utilizing the full height of the space, and our grow systems are about 5 to 6 layers, depends on which type of grow system, but evolving over.
So how many people work for you, Paul?
Almost 50 at this point.
Wow.
So yeah, and if we would include obviously the executives and the office staff, and we have our own distribution, so we do deliver our own product on our own trucks.
Oh, that's great.
We control the process from A to Z, the whole post-harvest handling, and obviously if you include all the farmers and the support staff and marketing people, it's over 50 actually.
Sure. Do you have a special social program too? I'd love you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So from just our own bottom of our own heart, we really were very much mission driven from the beginning, but we also realized that it's going to be very good for our brand to have a very strong social mission. And so we identified it very early on and set up set of core values, and one of those is that we're going to try to do everything locally. We're going to try to source supplies locally, but obviously developing the labor force was a big plus of what we're doing, and so we realized we're going to create pretty much a new job description, which is called vertical farmer or urban farmer. What is it, and how do you find these people? How do you train these people? So we knew that we're not educators. We don't have know-how, no skill, no financial capability of training and educating. But so we set up on a quest and finding some people who can do that. And luckily, we found fantastic partners. Windy City Harvest, which is an arm of Chicago Botanic Garden. It's a non-for-profit that's located in Chicago, has a program on urban farming and organic farming, and Aquaponics now. We helped them develop an aquaponic curriculum and build a model unit that the students can learn on. Also, another one is Growing Home. It's a fantastic organization as well. But the whole concept is to take kids from inner city, Chicago neighborhoods, with difficult backgrounds, in some cases, minor crime, offenders, mental disabilities, and so forth, and see if we can put them to work in urban farming and in vertical farms, and how that's going to work. Right. And actually, it's wonderful because over almost 30 of our team members came from these programs.
That's remarkable.
Retention rate is astonishingly high. I was actually expecting that we're going to have a lot of dropouts. Because it's when you're getting out of a boot camp and you're trying to get back on your feet and trying to find a job, it's hard to find a job when you have a criminal background. So that's one. But then how long these people are really going to stay and work at these positions. And I am absolutely shocked to learn that the retention rate is very high. And we some team members who've been with us for 3 years now. And
nice.
They started as harvesters or seeders, and now they're master growers, and they know their stuff, or they're supervisors.
Terrific. So where's FarmedHere going?
We know where we would want to go. Obviously, we're not sure if we're going to go there, but we want to go across the country. So we would love to go into other markets eventually, but we are also very realistic, and we're very cautious about how we're going to go about doing that. So the first thing first is to make sure that our farm here in Chicago is doing well. We have the capacity to scale up in other markets, but we believe that this concept can work, anywhere across, almost anywhere across the globe. And probably there are some markets that are better than Chicago, from point of view of energy costs, or utilization of things like solar power, to minimize the impact on the environment, regulations, cost of goods sold, and labor costs, and on and on and on. So Chicago probably is not an ideal place. It's a good place to start, because we've learned a lot. And obviously the climate lends itself for indoor farming.
Absolutely. What about product diversity? You plan on spreading out beyond the leafy greens?
Yes. So we've done quite a bit of R&D on things that people already know how to grow. Correct. People grow strawberries and tomatoes, houses and peppers, for decades. It's just a matter of adjusting the design of these grow systems into vertical setting, and also use of artificial light. So we have good results, and ultimately I believe that we're going to go into fruiting plants and much diversify. But also we have value-added products already. So we make our salad dressing, which is a big success. The salad dressing is all natural, made from our own greens. We're looking into juicing products and so forth. So trying to find additional opportunities with the greens that we already grow.
Are we going to see a FarmedHere green market associated with your outfits?
Maybe. That's possible as well down the road. I think that we have a lot of requests for education, for tours.
Sure.
We do quite a bit of tours, as much as we can accommodate, obviously. At the same time, there are food safety issues, and while we're under construction, for example, we're expanding again within the building. So it's difficult to host tours, but developing an education center or a market would be right thing.
So could you talk a little bit about some of the details of how you grow your food? We already interviewed Illumitex, and they tell us that you're using some of their lighting in your growing systems. How did you come by that?
Well, we started testing lighting in 2010, 2011, and I recall that at that time LEDs were very expensive and inefficient, and that's why we decided to begin our commercial growing with fluorescent lighting, just because of cost and the efficiency at that time. When you really do a financial analysis and compare the cost of the light fixtures and light bulbs and energy usage, per the time of the light that you need, and power values and so forth, and what kind of yields you're getting. At that time, fluorescents were the answer. To my surprise, a lot of big companies are becoming much more interested in horticulture, lighting companies.
Yep.
And Philips, Illumitex, and many others have developed fantastic products. So about 13 months ago, we set up some trials, and we looked at lighting again. And we tried to identify, what's new on the market and what kind of fixtures can work for us in our setting, but also not in our setting. There are other questions that one need to answer about lighting, because most of grow lights are designed for greenhouses, correct?
Right.
So greenhouses are located in rural areas where building codes or zoning codes are much more relaxed, and usually these grow systems are not vertical, and on and on and on. So when you really are looking at places like Chicago or New York and other major cities where building codes are very stringent, and building departments have hundreds of inspectors, and they really inspect everything, and you really have to look at the design of vertical growing systems. Now you have all kinds of issues you need to look at. So you need to find light fixtures that not only deliver light, but also comply with codes and provide the whole solution. So we had great experience with Illumitex. And recently we have started converting our existing grow systems into LEDs with big success. And we already completed a couple. We are already working on 2 more right now. So we're building 2 more grow systems, which are going to be LED, all 100%.
So when you, these lights, I presume, are on timers, right? Because you don't need to have them on all day. Is that correct?
That depends, correct. It depends on the recipe. So, but you can also modulate light with dimmers, correct? So you don't only have to turn them on and off. You can dim the light. You can almost recreate the a day cycle. And what we also found is that with the appropriate color spectrum. There's some companies, including Illumitex, I think they're going to offer this next year. They're going to have a fully adjustable light fixture.
Exactly, that's what they were saying.
I don't know if they talked about this or
They
not.
did.
But
Yeah, they did.
Okay, so you're going to be able to play with wavelengths in addition to dimming. So we do dimming now. But obviously, imagine if we can develop a recipe for kale, or mustard or baby lettuces.
Oh, yeah.
And really fully adjust the light to what the plant needs and a proper type of growing system. Obviously, everybody's different, but we're trying to find what works for us. It would be amazing.
So can you tell a little bit about the hydroponics, or do you use aquaponics or hydroponics in your?
We are 100%. We are 100% aquaponics as of this summer. So we have ran. We did some experimenting with aeroponics. We ran synthetic fertilizers side by side with aquaponics for about 2 years in this commercial size facility to learn, what are the benefits of doing each one and compare. But obviously, hydroponics with synthetic fertilizers is not an allowed type of process for organic certification. So at this aquaponics, to our knowledge, is the only method that would allow you to get an organic certification, so which really was part of our mission, So that's why we're aquaponics.
So that's the model that the plant championed some time back that you're now replicating to commercial levels.
Correct. Yes, the plant had presented aquaponics to City of Chicago in indoors and different sizes and shapes and forms. And as I mentioned, we were able to acquire that greenhouse in 2011, which really helped us to understand aquaponics because it was already built and operating. So, and actually was organic certified as well in 2004, since 2000.
So, my perception, and I know yours too, is that this is a logarithmically scaling industry. That is, 5 years ago, there was almost nothing. 3 years ago, there was something. Today, there's a lot more than that. In another 5 years from now, this will look totally different again. Do you think it's too early to start thinking about coming up with an international association for indoor growers that features vertical farms as one of their mainstays?
I don't think it's too early at all. I think it's about time. I am quite amazed that it doesn't exist yet. And I think I have an answer for that. I think we are all so busy building. We are so busy growing. What I mean the guys in Europe, the guys in Japan, and us and everybody else.
Yep.
There's only so many hours in a day. So, a lot of these companies are startups. And so you're dealing with, capital and investors and boards and expansions.
You want to sleep
lawyers.
at night, right?
Yeah, you want to sleep it. So at the end of the day, there's so much time. So I think that as the industry becomes, begins to mature a little bit, which I think it's gonna begin very soon. You're gonna see some consolidation, maybe. Some companies will merge. You're also going to see some associations being formed. I think it's about time. There is an aquaponic association that's pretty active.
Right.
But I don't think there is a vertical farming association that's properly funded and staffed yet. So it will be a wonderful thing.
So, Paul, as part of your aquaponics, are you growing fish?
Correct. Yes.
Do you sell those, or do you?
Yeah, we do. We do sell our fish. You can look at aquaponics two different ways, obviously. You can set up your aquaponics systems with a focus on fish, or you can set up your aquaponics systems with a focus on greens. You can set it up, 50-50. In our case, the fish are really an engine. We actually call those parts of grow system where fish live, we call them fish engines. And our fish engines just literally provide nutrients for our plants. So the fish is almost a byproduct of our process, but we do sell our fish.
What kind of fish are they?
Tilapia, blue Nile tilapia. We also do some black Nile tilapia, but the same species.
So you feed the fish, and then the fish export things to the water, and then the plants use that. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yes. It's a very natural process. So there's nitrifying bacteria, and there's several different types of bacteria that we develop in our grow system, and they live and thrive in filtration systems. Mm-hmm. The fish effluent is being collected in what's called a biofilter, and there's a first step of bacteria breaking out ammonia into nitrites. That's what takes place in aquaponics. So the ammonia that's produced by fish through their effluent and gills, fish exhale huge amounts of ammonia in their metabolism cycle, but that ammonia has been converted to nitrites and eventually nitrates through the bacteria in the filtration process. So it's an all natural process that occurs in fish ponds and rivers and lakes and and seas. It's just being mimicked in a controlled environment. That's how it works. So the plants take the nitrites and feed themselves and filter the water through the root systems. And in our grow systems, some of them have 30 to 40,000 plants on them, 6 layers. So that root structure of 40,000, let's say, basil plants or 80,000 kale plants, it's a massive biological filter that works like a huge comb and basically brushes off all the nutrients of the water and cleans it and from nitrites as well, actually. So the bacteria live not only in biofiltration system, but bacteria and microbes live on the walls of grow beds, on the walls of tanks.
Sure.
The entire system becomes an ecosystem, correct? So you got to maintain it properly.
Got it.
It's a living organism.
You don't have to add anything to the water. Is that correct?
Oh, you do sometimes. So it depends on crops that you grow. Obviously, you cannot produce all the micronutrients, for example, at needed ratios through just fresh fish. So there are different types of applications. Some people do foliar sprays. Some people add soluble micronutrients into water. We do both. Depends on the type of a recipe that we are using at any given time. But iron or calcium, magnesium, sometimes you may run into low values and some deficiencies. Also, the absorption levels are very important. So, I tell people sometimes that aquaponics in some cases is a little bit of art. It's obviously a lot of science, but there's also a little bit of art. And you are working on a living organism, and from that perspective, you have to treat it that way because it will have its own character. So I see aquaponics systems that different people build have different characters, and they feel different, they work differently. It's amazing, actually.
It's an organism.
Yeah, it is. Actually, it is an organism. You're creating an organism, and you have to deal with it. And you guys know better than me. I'm just an art.
So, Paul, do you enrich the atmosphere with a little CO2, or do you leave it alone?
We add little CO2. We're going to be adding more. We're working on upgrading our cooling systems, hopefully this spring. We are going to be adding much more CO2.
Right.
And we already experimented a little bit. We found it very beneficial. And it's just a matter of getting it done. So
right.
So you don't have to add any herbicides or pesticides, right? So how do you keep the plants from getting contaminated?
Well, first of all, you control your environment. So you start with developing a food safety system. We have spent 2 years working with food safety consultants, and we've developed a HACCP plan for aquaponics and vertical farming. And we're HACCP certified, third-party audited at this point. So a lot of our retailers wanted that as well. So you start with workers' hygiene, okay, and obviously then you move on into identifying all the risk factors that could affect your farm, from inputs and so forth, and so by sealing the environment, that's controlled environment agriculture, vertical farming, I think, gives people a fantastic platform for raising a bar on food safety to tremendous levels. I mean, it's 1,000 miles above what a traditional farmer or traditional organic farmer can do in a brown field somewhere. Dirt, it's they can't control much, correct? So they can hope for better. They can control some of the inputs that they put on the field, but that's about it. In our case, we filter our air. We have a pretty sophisticated cooling system. We are using UV filtration and HEPA filtration to catch mold, kill the non-beneficial bacteria through the filtration of our air, just to begin with that. And obviously, in aquaponics, if you maintain a proper balance of nutrients and microbes, the systems are healthy by themselves.
When the workers come in, do they have to change into other uniforms?
Some of them do, yes, depends on the role. So some of them do, they'll change shoes, they'll change into uniforms, they'll wash their hands, they wear gloves all the time. When they work on plants, let's say, and they will cut or trim or transplant, they change tools, they sanitize tools between different grow beds, different levels, different sections of systems. So there are a lot of different steps that we take to make sure that our farm is food safe. Mm-hmm. But it also goes to our suppliers too, because when you ask me about nutrients and how we develop those, also a lot depends on how we feed our fish, correct? So
sure.
Now we were able to find somebody who makes USDA organic fish food. It's a funny story actually, because USDA doesn't have a standard to certify fish, as seafood. There is no organic certification for seafood, but there is an organic certification for seafood meal. So, anyway, so we're using an USDA organic certified, fish feed, basically.
So there's a rich history of catfish farming in the United States, at least for commercial purposes. Maybe that's where that might have come from. Who knows?
Maybe you're right. That's possible. Correct.
Paul, what is the grow cycle? How many days?
As far as plants go, that depends on the crop. In some of our systems, we do grow some baby greens. We call them baby greens or petite greens. So they're not really microgreens. They're not that tall. They're 4 or 5 inches tall. And it could be arugula, kale, mustard greens, all kinds of baby lettuces mixed together in salad mixes. The cycle from seed to harvest is anywhere from 10 to 12 days.
Wow.
And with our crops like basil, from seed to harvest, the first harvest, because basil could be harvested several times of the same plant, it's about 25 days from transplant, which is really fantastic.
So getting back to the lighting question then, did you find a big improvement in those times when you switched to the LEDs?
Well, not really. I mean, we found some improvement in the duration, but you can't fool nature too much, correct? I mean, there is yes. So the DNA of these plants, it is what it is, and
Sure.
no matter what you shoot at them, obviously we don't want to nuke them, correct? So we want to grow organically. So we can do so much, but we found that with lighting we achieved two significant goals. Number one, we have reduced energy consumption, which if there are any skeptics about indoor vertical farming, usually those people raise concerns about energy consumption. Correct. So if we can reduce that, or at least have a path or a plan on how we're going to reduce our energy consumption, then we're in good shape. Correct. So these LEDs allowed us to cut our energy bill by 30%, wow, which is very significant. But also allowed increasing yields by about the same. Okay. So, So, and consistency is good, and flavor is great, and color is great, the quality of crops is great. Yeah. So, it's definitely a move in the right direction.
Oh, nice.
Is your office right next to the growing area? Can you see it from there?
No, you can't. No, I would have. Go there.
So far away.
Getting back to the safety of food, is that the reason why you don't allow a lot of people to come visit? Because you never know what they might track into your store or into your facility, I should say.
Correct. I mean, there's worker safety. There's, obviously you need to do OSHA and job safety. So, having people touring facility where you might have, slippery floor and there's water and electricity in one place. Correct. So, our workers are trained on job safety as well. So, in addition to food safety protocols, we had to develop job safety programs as well and get them certified and so forth. Make it. And this was quite a challenge, quite frankly, because when we reached out to Illinois Department of Labor, and they were very responsive and helpful, very helpful actually, and or federal OSHA, they didn't know what to deal with as well. They said, "What to do with?" We said, "Well, we're gonna." Grow fish and plants in one place, and it's going to be vertically done, and people are going to be working on lifts and carrying wet plants with roots over electrical lighting fixtures, and they're like, oh my God, so all kinds of issues you got to deal with. But so it's workable. Come on, I mean, there are a lot of manufacturing processes already that people use that are much more complex than we do, and much less safe. All the chemical plants. I mean, come on, guys. It's not rocket science, and so developing a job safety program is not rocket science. You just got to follow it. So.
Paul, you can say it's rocket science as long as you're growing rocket.
Yeah.
So another idea that I heard about in one of my many trips, unfortunately, I take too many nowadays, but one of the concepts that arose in a discussion might have some appeal for you, and that is to set up a viewing stand with a transparent window that allowed the people to sit and watch the procedures. Here's the nursery, here's the planting, here's the transfer, here's the way they harvest, here's how they package it. You can see the whole operation, but you don't have to actually breach the safety issues. You can sit in a stands and actually watch this happen. And at the end of that, of course, in an hour, then they say, okay, now let's go have lunch.
That's an excellent idea. That's an excellent idea.
I thought you could make more money selling tickets than you could produce that way.
Correct. I mean, we do receive a lot of emails, a lot of inquiries.
Oh, yeah.
Not from people who have interest in, good food or urban agriculture, vertical farming, but also from, parents of kids from schools and teachers, science teachers, and local, high schools and elementary schools, and the produce guys, and that work for the grocery stores that we sell to, and they all want to come for tours. Well, we would have to be in tourism business to accommodate all of them. We just can't. So,
that's right.
But the idea that you mentioned, I think it's an excellent solution that would create that physical barrier between the that we need to maintain between the guests and the farm and the controlled environment.
Right.
So,
Paul, you mentioned that you would like to expand to other parts of the country. So there's only you and your partner there. How will that work? Will you train people there to be able to go out and manage other facilities?
Oh yeah, of course. We would have to get ready for that expansion, and the intellectual capital is also human capital, correct? So we need to find right people, train them, find believers in what we do, and who are equally passionate or even more passionate about this, and bring them on board and train them. And but I think the model of scaling up into other markets, that, at least on our end, is going to depend very heavily on that local market. We want to be perceived as a local business, correct?
You bet.
We don't want to come next Kraft Foods or somebody like that who just comes to a new market with a product.
Right.
No, we want to come to a new market as a partner. So, which means we would envision partnering with local business community, for example. So if we go to another market, maybe we'll partner with somebody who has capital, who's business experience, produce experience, food experience, some existing operator. And obviously, hiring people from the community makes a huge sense, maybe a huge impact. Because we don't want to hire people in Chicago, train them in Chicago, and then send them to New York. It just doesn't make any sense. There are a lot of communities in New York State or city, neighborhoods in New York City that have, high unemployment rates, and people need jobs, correct? Well-paid jobs and pleasant jobs. And working in a vertical farm is a very pleasant thing, because you work with, a lot of oxygen and light and plants. I mean, it's just a fantastic thing. So, and the environment is controlled year round. So, you get used to good weather every day.
That's true. Have you thought of partnering with the Culinary Institutes of America?
Yeah, there you go. So, we are working with a lot of chefs. We're talking to a lot of chefs. We joined a restaurant association here in Chicago.
Excellent.
There's also a green restaurant association that's about 50, I think over 50 members now. A lot of these restaurants buy from, or they're trying to source food from local sources, from local farmers.
That's right.
And like I said earlier, the challenge is that, in climates like here in Midwest, you just can't grow year round unless it's a controlled environment, agriculture or vertical farm. There's no other way. So Dickson was right. It's gonna be indoors.
I was quoting somebody else.
No, you quoted him well, or whatever it was. So good job there.
So do you think that is the future of farming, that it will be mainly local and indoors?
To some extent, with certain types of crops, the high value crops, the crops that are very difficult to grow outdoors, that are very sensitive. Well, basil is a very difficult plant to grow, so is arugula. It's a colder weather crop. It wants likes low pH and doesn't like a lot of wind and doesn't like a lot of sun. And kale is a difficult crop to grow, okay? And if you want to grow baby kale in California, yeah, you can, but the shelf life after harvest is 3 days. So, I mean, unless you find a trucking company that drives, 250 miles an hour, okay, to Chicago, speed train, we don't have those. They have them in Europe and in Japan. We still don't have speed trains in here. I can't believe this. I don't understand it. It's like, you could probably put it on a speed train and get it to Chicago very quickly, correct? But other than that, so baby kale is just not going to work from California. It's not going to have enough shelf life to end up on a consumer plate in Chicago and be enjoyed some. So there are number of crops that, in my opinion, need to be grown locally. And what I mean locally is it Saudi Arabia, is it Japan, is it Chicago, New York, doesn't matter. There are certain types of crops, obviously, that the local population enjoys, and there are some, culinary traditions and so forth in different markets, and people eat different things. But is vertical farming going to I get that question all the time. It's like, is vertical farming going to replace traditional agriculture? No, I don't think in our lifetime. But imagine, in a few hundred years from now, maybe, and who knows, and I don't know how people are going to live a few hundred years from now, but the model needs to work economically, and my response is as follows, to those who challenge me on this. I say, look, vertical farming is going to have a downhill from here, and traditional farmers have an uphill because they need to deal with climate change, they need to deal with additional regulations, they need to deal with food safety regulations that we're finally getting here, at some decent level. They're going to deal with water shortages, oil prices, transportation costs, and on and on and on. Where vertical farmers are going to deal with better LEDs, better designed grow systems, better designed filtration for aquaponics, better knowledge, know-how, experience, better engineers and architects who need to bring into this discussion, because not a lot of other architects understand vertical farming yet. So they need to come into play as well, and mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and so forth. So it's only going to get better for us because we're going to have access to better solutions, better technology, more trained people, and our costs are going to be coming down over time, and actually our yields are going to be going up. And we are going to learn, as we have learned, spending, many millions of dollars to date. We've learned our own mistakes, and our know-how is obviously there already. So we're very happy with the results we achieved to date.
Right.
So I have a question that actually a listener has sent in, and he says that since a lot of these vertical farms are built, as yours is, in older buildings, does it take a lot of retrofitting to make them suitable for farming? And is that something that we can either minimize or avoid in the future?
That's an excellent question. So one needs to work with an architect, and I tell people all the time, those who call me or email me, hey, I want to start a vertical farm, what do I do? I said, well, I'm not going to send you a book on how to do it. You can buy a book that's called Vertical Farm and just learn about the concept.
A signed book, by the way.
Well, yeah, nobody has written a book yet about how to, technically design the vertical farm. And you start with architects and engineers because you're dealing with buildings. It's not a farm, so you don't go and see a farmer first. You go and meet with an architect first. And then you meet with a real estate person first. And you start looking at buildings and identifying them and qualifying them by setting up what's required, which is a project objective. So when you meet with your architect, you're going to tell him, I want to grow plants indoors. And an architect's going to analyze it and say, okay, here are the codes that you need to apply. Here are the food safety things that you need to meet. And obviously, you're better off probably bringing a food safety expert right away, an environmental expert right away as well. So when you go and look at these buildings, a retrofit of a dilapidated, building that's built in, 1920s, let's say, that's been sitting vacant for 40 years is going to be a horrible rehab job. Where you can find a building that's built in 1980s and was vacant for a year or 2 or 5 or 6, like ours, and it was in pretty good shape. It had no environmental concerns. It was clean. It had no mold, no dust, and so forth. I mean, there are things that you can clean and remove and repaint. But obviously, it's a big decision. It's like buying your own home almost. You have to look at it. Now you're farming indoors. So the big component of this whole puzzle is real estate and architecture and engineering. And that's what people need to really, really focus on. Because a lot of conversation, as I go to conferences or I'm either invited to speak or I meet people or they email me, a lot of questions are on technology. They immediately jump like, oh, is hydroponics better than aquaponics? Or what kind of grow system, what kind of lighting, what do you use, what inputs? Well, what type of farm do you want to develop? You have to ask yourself, what's the size of the farm? What's the height? What's the location? What are the real estate values in my neighborhood, in my community? I need to find a good real estate deal too, correct? Because that's a long-term investment. So you need to look at it and say, am I going to buy a building versus leasing? Okay, what are the benefits of that? And what is the cost of rehab? And the cost of rehab is greatly going to depend on the condition of the building and how well it was maintained, because the building needs to meet a pretty high standard, which is a food safety standard. So it's almost like building a hospital, almost like building a school. It needs to be, a safe environment for people to work.
Yep.
It needs to be a safe environment for people to produce food that's going to be consumed by somebody else. So it's not just a tire repair shop. It's a food facility. So it really needs to meet very high standards.
So in that sense, your training as an architect was very useful, right?
Extremely useful. My training, my experience of, perfect from the building point of view. Okay, obviously it wasn't perfect from the biology point of view. No.
Right. You can't be everything, right?
And you're not alone either, Paul. I mean, your wife helps a lot on this too, so you got a lot of input from a lot of close people.
I wanted to ask you, what is your wife is your partner? What is her training? Also an architect?
She's an interior designer.
Oh.
Bingo. That's great.
So she enjoy being part of the business?
Oh, she loves it.
Yeah.
She absolutely loves it. It's an extremely rewarding experience when you sell a product. And she's on the marketing and sales side and brand side, and she really works with a lot of our buyers and customers. And she does education programs for schools and retail industry as well. So a lot of education to the community in general. She really enjoys that a lot. Most of the founders that we have a few other partners, and none of them had really experience in farming. But like Dickson, you mentioned, we were blessed really, because Chicago had that history of urban farming. So,
that's right.
There are guys here who developed urban farms in the 70s, and they're still running. So you can find these people, and they live in your neighborhood, and you can ask them questions. So I do not need to advertise in California to find a grower, correct?
Right,
I can still find one in Chicago probably. And we have a long history, obviously, of culinary art, and we have a history of, good number of agriculture schools. There's an agriculture high school in Chicago that has an aquaponics system now.
Oh, wow.
South State, Chicago University has a beautiful aquaponics system going on. We developed one for Windy City Harvest, which is in collaboration with City of Chicago Colleges. They have one as well. So, it really it's becoming an industry, and even from the education point of view.
Lovely.
So, Paul, do you take your product home and eat it at home?
Every day.
Every night?
Yes. Every day we eat our product at home. We have two daughters. One is in college in Europe now. She's actually on the way home today for holidays. But the second one is a younger one, and they hate it because they just feel like we're eating the same thing today. But you see, I bring a lot of variety home, and they're both foodies. They eat, they cook, and we cook at home a lot. So it's guys, it's amazing actually. One of the most rewarding experiences, for example, if I'll go to a holiday party at somebody's house, and I can bring my greens or salad dressings with me, and just hand it to them, to the host, and say, "Here, I brought you some food." And he says, "I said, well, I just harvested 2 hours ago, okay, and I've grown it for you."
That's fabulous.
Like, wow, are you kidding? I said, yes.
Good stuff.
That's really an amazing part of what we do. If I go for a haircut or go to a dentist appointment, they say, "Hey, what do you do?" I said, "I'm an organic farmer." They said, "Oh my God, you got to travel a lot." I said, "Not really." I said, "Well, my farm is 8 miles away from my house."
That's right. That's right. So
Nice.
I have one final question from my point of view, at least, and that is that out of necessity, the country of Japan has obviously come up to speed very fast. The Fukushima event sort of galvanized the country. A lot of people refused to eat food after that because some of the food turned up radioactive, not all of it, but some of it. And as a result, now there are about 150 versions of what you do. Recently in the last 6 weeks, Toshiba and Panasonic announced big commercial programs sponsored part by the government, I'm sure, but they didn't say that, but by themselves, of course. They're going into the food industry, the indoor growing food industry. And at the same time, you've got this wonderful building, Persona O2, which is an example of an office building with food systems inside the office building. So last week, Microsoft announced that they're going to try to do the same thing out in their Seattle Microsoft office, to grow food where you sit on every floor in every executive's house, to teach them the value of fresh indoor grown food. What do you think of all this? How do you think our government, this government, the United States government, what role do you think they should be playing in helping this industry get established?
It's an excellent question, Dickson. A very simple answer. Farming is subsidized all over the world.
Right.
Okay, so it has been subsidized for decades and decades and decades. I mean, look at our current farm bill, okay? The farm bill is billions of dollars.
Isn't it, though?
Okay? Yes. How much money is allocated to urban farming or vertical
Zero.
farming? Zero.
That's right.
Okay, so the government needs to learn, or we need to educate the government. I know you're doing a lot of this. You travel a lot. You talk to people all the time.
Yeah.
I grow every day, so I can only travel so much, correct? But if all of us, I think, reach out to the politicians and explain to them what we're doing, they'll be happy to come and, take a couple pictures and visit the farm, because it's a great story. Hey, we're creating jobs, we're putting vacant buildings to work, we're creating real estate tax revenue, construction jobs, you name it, and obviously fresh, healthy food. So who's not going to like that story, correct? But it's just about allocating the funds and resources, and I think that really stems from maybe lack of focus on innovation in general. Because what are we subsidizing today? We're subsidizing the same companies and the same types of crops that we've been subsidizing in the U.S. for the last 60 years.
Correct.
So where's the innovation in agriculture?
Yeah.
So the farmer can buy a combine with a GPS and a surround sound system now. It's okay, great. Maybe it will help him to plow the field or collect all the GMO soybeans. But other than that, there's very little innovation. So
you're right.
I think that's the answer. They just need to learn about it.
Sure.
And slip it in the existing subsidy for farms, because we have to subsidize farming. It's an essential necessity for all of us to live, correct? Food.
Got it.
So we cannot not subsidize food. Food needs to be affordable to everyone, abundant, healthy, and ideally local, correct? That's my opinion, at least.
Well, mine too, thanks.
All right, Dickson, I think that's a good one, right?
Yep.
We've been speaking with Paul Hardej of FarmedHere. Thanks for joining us, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Well, gentlemen, it's been my great pleasure. Thank you for having me. And Dickson, thanks a lot. You changed my life, for sure. You changed a family's life, and you changed the lives of a lot of team members who work for us, because you set the vision. We just rolled up our sleeves and we made it work. And thank you for doing this.
Well, you're my reality check.
Okay, thank you.
You've done great, and from now on, your lives will be helping mine.
All right, thank you. Well, you don't have to put additional pressure on me, but we're going to make it work. We're going to make it work.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Paul. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
See you.
This episode of Urban Agriculture, like all the others, can be found at urbanag.ws and also on iTunes. And if you have any questions or comments, send them to urbanag@urbanag.ws. Dixon Despommier is at urbanag.ws and verticalfarm.com. Thank you, Dixon.
You're welcome, Vincent.
Always a pleasure to do a show with you.
Absolutely.
I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.ws. The music that you hear at the beginning of Urban Ag is performed by John Harrison with the Wichita State University Chamber Players, and at the end is by Ronald Jenkins. You can find his work at ronaldjenkins.com. You've been listening to Urban Agriculture. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon.
See you upstairs at the Vertical Farm.